Suga looked at Jimin. Jimin looked at Suga. And in that single exchange, that half-second of eye contact between two people who have known each other for 13 years, 70,000 people somehow knew before a single note had played that something was about to go very wrong in the best possible way. What happened next has been replayed more times than almost any other clip from the entire European leg of the Arirang World Tour. Not because it was the most technically impressive moment, not because it was the most emotional, because it was the most human. And because Jimin's face, in that specific second, said something that no amount of stage training can teach a person to perform. This channel exists for the army who has watched the concert fan cams and still gone back to the between-song moments, the ones who find the unscripted parts more interesting than the choreographed ones. The ones who understand that what makes BTS genuinely different from everything else in their field is not the production value. It's what happens when the production breaks down and you see who's actually standing on that stage. The last part of this video is going to show you something about the Jimin and Suga dynamic that the highlight reels completely missed. The Arirang World Tour is, at its structural core, one of the most precisely engineered concert productions ever mounted. The 360-degree stage, the catwalks extending toward every corner of the stadium, the integration of the National Gukok Center Ensemble, the transition from traditional Korean folk elements into contemporary stadium pop that critics from The Hollywood Reporter to Consequence have described as something genuinely unprecedented. It is, in other words, a show where almost nothing is left to chance. Almost. Because somewhere in the structure of every single Arirang concert, there was a segment that is designed specifically to destroy all of that control. And it is the best part of the night. It begins with a phrase. 7 grown men who between them have sold out stadiums on every continent, collected more chart records than most artists see in an entire career, and performed in front of cumulative audiences in the tens of millions, stand on a stage together and yell with absolute commitment, "DJ, spin that shit." And then the soundboard plays a random song from their discography. Not a rehearsed song, not a song they've been running in soundcheck, a genuinely random selection from 13 years of music, which in the case of BTS means a catalog that runs from their earliest 2013 hip-hop material through multiple eras of reinvention, each of which came with its own choreography, its own specific muscle memory, its own set of moves that the body learns and then, over the subsequent years of learning different moves, begins to quietly forget. The members have to perform whatever comes on, right now, in front of 70,000 people. No notes, no rehearsal, just whatever their bodies remember. The concept itself is not new to longtime ARMY. BTS has a history of finding humor in exactly this kind of situation, the unexpected, the unrehearsed, the moment where the performance machine briefly reveals the people operating it. What's different on the Arirang tour is the scale. These are not intimate fan meetings or small venue performances. These are full stadium shows, where the gap between the version of BTS that is always in control and the version that is visibly panicking about whether they remember the second verse is enormous. And that gap, that specific, delightful gap, is where the magic lives. In the early dates of the tour, the surprise song segment produced plenty of viral moments. Members blanking on choreography mid-sequence, improvised attempts at moves that bore only passing resemblance to the originals, the specific expression that appears on a person's face when muscle memory fails in real time and there are 70,000 people watching. But something became clear very quickly across multiple shows, across multiple compilations that started circulating by late April. 2 members remembered more than the others, V and Jimin. The evidence started in threads, then it moved to compilations, then it became the kind of acknowledged fandom fact that gets referenced casually as shared knowledge, the way ARMY eventually catalogs everything eventually. V and Jimin, best choreography memory in the group, not by a small margin. The evidence was difficult to dispute. Clip after clip of Jimin landing moves that other members were actively inventing on the spot. Moves from 2016, from 2018, from the early tour era material that most of the group had not performed in years. His body simply remembered. Which is, when you think about what that means, not a small thing. Jimin trained as a contemporary dance major before being selected as a BTS member. His relationship with choreography is fundamentally different from the other members. It is not just performance technique for him, it is a primary language. The body that learned those early BTS routines learned them through a lens of formal dance training, which encodes movement deeply, more durably. What looks like good memory is actually something closer to physical fluency. And watching that fluency appear, unexpectedly, in the middle of a random surprise song at a stadium show in Madrid or Brussels or wherever the tour happened to be that night, is one of those moments where you understand something about a person that you couldn't have understood from watching them perform intentionally. It's the difference between watching someone write a prepared speech and watching them speak without notes. The real thing lives in the unscripted version. Now, the specific moment. The one that's circulated fastest, the one that has been described in dozens of different languages across dozens of different platforms as the definitive DJ spin that clip of the European leg. It happened during the Brussels shows. The song that came on is not important for the purposes of this video. What matters is that it was early catalog material, something from a period in BTS's history when the choreography was more intricate, more physically demanding in a specific way, and, critically, something that the members had not performed in what several of them visibly appeared to calculate in real time, a very long time. The camera, one of the main stage cameras, not a fan cam, caught Jimin and Suga in the same frame in the moment the song started. And that is the clip. Not the performance that followed, not the recovery, not the moment where it all comes together or falls apart. The moment right before. The look. Here is what happens, broken down as precisely as language allows. The song starts. There is a half beat, maybe less, where both of them are processing what they're hearing. You can see the recognition land in sequence. First the information, then the implication of the information, then the specific calculation of what performing this right now in front of 70,000 people is going to require. Suga turns his head toward Jimin. His expression, and this is the part that the frame-by-frame analysis accounts were particularly focused on, is not panic. It's something more specific than panic. It's the face of someone who has already run the calculation and arrived at a conclusion he finds both accurate and mildly catastrophic. His expression says, "We are not going to be fine." And Jimin, whose face in that same half second is doing approximately 4 different things simultaneously, looks back at Suga and something shifts. The recognition of Suga's expression, the assessment of the situation, and then, underneath both of those, something that is not quite panic and not quite confidence, but lives in the exact space between them. He almost smiles. Not the stage smile, the other one. The one that appears when something has gone genuinely sideways, and Jimin has decided, somewhere in a very quick internal process, that sideways is going to be fine. That half-second exchange, Suga's quiet catastrophizing, Jimin's decision to find it funny, was caught on camera and shared on X within approximately 40 minutes of the show ending. The caption on the original post was 4 words: the look. The look. It had 3 million impressions before midnight. What made it travel was not just the content of the exchange, it was the recognition factor. The specific experience of watching 2 people who know each other extremely well communicate an entire situation in half a second without a single word. People who were not ARMY were sharing this clip. People who had never watched a BTS concert. People who followed accounts that had never posted about K-pop before. The comments from that outside audience were, almost uniformly, some version of, "I don't know who these people are, but they have been friends for a very long time." There's a 2019 interview from a period when BTS was doing press for a particularly demanding tour cycle, where Suga was asked how the members handled the pressure of live performance when things didn't go as planned. He paused before answering, the way he always pauses before saying something he's actually thought about rather than something prepared. And then he said, "The members make it possible. When something goes wrong on stage, I look for the members. If they're fine, I'm fine. If they think it's funny, I think it's funny." He didn't name anyone specifically, he said, "the members." But ARMY, who watched that interview and stored it, and watched the Brussels clip and stored that too, put them next to each other this week in the way they always eventually put things next to each other. Because the clip is, among other things, a live illustration of exactly what Suga described in 2019. Something going wrong, someone looking for a member, finding Jimin's face and deciding based on what Jimin's face is doing that everything is going to be fine. The performance that followed the look is a separate conversation entirely. What matters for the purposes of understanding why that half-second became the most replayed clip of the European leg is what it represents as a document. There are very few genuine windows into what happens inside a performer when the performance breaks down. Most professional entertainers are trained, consciously or by accumulated experience, to manage those moments invisibly, to keep the mask in place even when the mask is slipping. What the Brussels clip captured was something that got through the management. A real calculation, a real reaction, a real exchange between two real people who happened to be doing this in front of 70,000 people and 40 dozen cameras. And right at the center of it, a specific dynamic that fans have been watching develop for 13 years, compressed into approximately 3 seconds. Suga processing, Jimin deciding to make it lighter, Suga receiving that lightness and adjusting. It is not a dramatic moment, it is not a romantic moment, it is not even by conventional metrics a particularly special moment. It is just two people being exactly who they are with each other, in public, without trying. And here is where it gets to something that lives slightly underneath the viral clip, slightly underneath the 3 million impressions and the compilation videos and the frame-by-frame analyses. The DJ Spin That segment exists at its structural level because BTS wanted to give ARMY something uncontrolled, something that couldn't be rehearsed, a deliberate interruption of the precision that defines everything else about the Airy Rank production. It is, in other words, a choice. A choice to be seen failing gracefully. A choice to let the muscle memory do what it does and trust that what happens will be worth watching regardless of whether it's perfect. And what that choice reveals across every show, across every random song, across every half-second of genuine panic and recovery is something about who BTS actually is underneath the production. Jimin's body remembering choreography from 2016, while the rest of him is also managing the live experience of 70,000 people and the cameras and the pressure and everything else. Suga looking at someone specific when the calculation doesn't add up. These are not performed things. They cannot be performed. They are what's actually there. There's one more layer to the Brussels clip, the part that most of the initial coverage didn't get to because it required watching the full fan cam rather than just the 15-second version that circulated fastest. About 40 seconds after the look, after the performance is started, after both of them have committed to whatever their bodies are going to do with this song, there's a second exchange. Briefer than the first, just a glance really. Jimin looks over at Suga mid-performance. Suga is doing his best, which, to be clear, is still significantly better than what most performers could produce in this situation because Suga's baseline is simply very high, and he catches Jimin's look, and something in Suga's face changes. Not dramatically, just slightly more okay than it was a second ago. The specific shift that happens when you're in the middle of something difficult and someone whose opinion you trust tells you without words that you're doing fine. That second glance, that second adjustment, that is the part that made the people who had already watched the clip 3 times watch it 3 more times. There's something worth sitting with here, not rushing to a conclusion about it, but actually sitting with it. The Arirang tour has 88 dates, dozens of cities, hundreds of thousands of people in total who will have been in a room with this group of 7 people performing something they have spent years building towards. And of all the moments from all those shows, one of the most replayed clips from the entire European leg is 3 seconds of eye contact during a deliberately chaotic segment where nothing was supposed to go right anyway. That tells you something about what people are actually coming to see. Not just the precision, not just the production, not just the set list or the stage design or the chart records. They're coming to see what happens in the space between the songs, the calculation, the look, the second glance. The part where the performers become people for a moment, and the specific chemistry between two people who have spent 13 years learning exactly what the other person's face means and exactly how to adjust accordingly becomes visible to 70,000 strangers all at once. The question worth carrying out of this video, the one that doesn't have a quick answer but might have a real one if you sit with it. Do you think the DJ Spin That segment works because it's funny? Or do you think it works because it's the only part of the show where BTS isn't performing for you, and for a few minutes you get to see them being something smaller and more real? Because those are two very different reasons to love the same moment. And the fact that so many people keep re-watching the clip of Jimin and Suga's shared look, specifically that clip out of everything else that happened in Brussels, suggests that maybe the answer isn't really about the choreography at all. If you've been watching BTS long enough to have your own version of this moment, the moment where you realized the real thing was different from everything around it, there's a space for that somewhere in this conversation. The most interesting observations about this group have always come from people who were paying close enough attention to notice the things that weren't in the press release.